Hey, I'm Rob,
And I'm Mike.
and we're just two normal lads exploring the mysterious, the controversial, and the conspiratorial.
Join us each week down the rabbit hole for our latest exciting discussions, ideas, and tinfoil banter.
Tinfoil Banter, serious questions, questionable conclusions. Good luck, Mike.
Thanks. Hello and welcome to Tinfoil Banter, episode number 6. And today we are talking about remote viewing. Rob, would you like to talk about a society that I think peaked a little bit early, the Greeks?
Yeah, they keep coming up as well, right? This is it's weird how there's a lot of eyes of a lot of discussion we have relate to the Greeks. But in this instance, what we're really talking about here is the oracles. So what they call the oracles, and these are people that could essentially claim they could see the future. Um, and this is kind of like tested at the time by I think there was like a king, and he was like, I don't know if I believe this, and if I do, I want to find like the best of the best. So he like boiled a tortoise and a lamb. Sorry, vegetarians, that's pretty savage, but he boiled them together, mixed them all up, and then basically got all of the local oracles to tell him what was in the pot. And only like one person was really able to do that. So yeah, the Greeks were the first people to really document with most of these things, the sort of details of psychics or remote viewing or ESP or whatever you want to call it. So yeah, Mike and thoughts on the Greeks.
Well, if we think about the Oracle,
Mm.
and we think about the Matrix,
Yeah, that's the first thing I think about too.
yeah,
Mm. There is
she
no
sees everything. She even, I suppose they've taken the root word from that of the Oracle being able to see everything. It has been about 2 decades since I watched that film.
You know what? I might just watch it tonight. Why not?
It's a
Yeah,
good film.
I've always loved the Matrix. There's loads of religious references there because I think you find if you really follow like Neo's story, he's kind of like Jesus in a lot of
Yeah,
ways. Um,
I'm
but
thinking about the king that made everyone guess what was in the dishes.
mm,
How many people were guessing? Because eventually, statistically, you will guess what's in there, even if it is was it tortoise and
tortoise and a
lamb?
lamb. Yeah, I don't know how common those ingredients were in
I don't
Greece
know.
at this time.
A
Uh,
thousand type monkeys at a typewriter will eventually guess right, though, won't they?
Also, some people might just have a really good nose, and like you said, cooked tortoise before, and thought, you know what, this will taste great with a bit of lamb.
So, is,
Um,
is it
yeah.
all just a guessing game?
Well, I think it was pretty primitive back then. It was just there was a lot of people claiming they could see the future, and this guy wanted to kind of see if he could find anyone that he thought really could. And
Mm.
apparently this person like went through like a whole experience of like the smells and the chopping up the meat, and he could recall all of that. I say he, could have been she, a they. Um, but really, after that though, there wasn't really any reference to like psychics or anything. So that was obviously like 300 BC. You got to fast forward to the 19th century, and then in 1882, the Society of Psychical Research was founded in London, and it still exists. And it's the
Hmm.
first organization to conduct experiments on psychic and paranormal phenomena. So basically, they had loads of subjects throughout time. They had some like sisters, there was like 5 sisters, and there was like a load of other guys that could claim they could do all of these crazy things. But the more you read about those, you find that most of the time they later found out that the tests they thought were successful were down to like non-verbal cues or facial cues, or even in one instance, a guy was like hidden a picture in a pencil and asked and swapped the pencil with him. So it was like
Hmm.
a big setup. But this society existed. These people existed that these people believed that something was there in terms of the realm of the psychic or the ability to do things beyond our sort of mental understanding.
Yeah,
Mm.
I'm not. There's more to this world than man can reckon with, to quote Iron Maiden.
Yeah. Okay.
um, I think there are other historical sort of references. If you think of even Macbeth, the three witches, they had the ability to see out. They did share
Yeah.
an eye, but they could. I don't know if they were psychic per se, though.
Well, the thing is, obviously we're calling this episode remote viewing, but it's kind of like a interchangeable term with like psychics, ESP, right? So extra sensory perception. That was
Hmm.
one that was very commonly known in like the 70s. It's all the same, but remote viewing is actually something quite different. It's the ability to like see places that they've never been before, either just transport themselves there mentally or see through other people's eyes. We'll
Mm.
talk about some examples of that in a little while, but I think when this really came into its own was in 1921. There was a guy called Rene, and I think it's Warcollier or Warcollier, or I'm not really sure how to pronounce his name, but he was like a chemical engineer, an inventor, but he was also into like parapsychology. So he'd like devoted a lot of his time to studies of telepathy, and he kind of started to like coin key terms. So he was quite a big name to anyone that's like really interested in the subject. He's like one of the greats in a sense because he was explaining how it was not necessarily seeing a picture, but it was like feeling an experience, just getting you to get the right answers, and that they were these people were not always correct because there's this thing called latency where it's a bit delayed, and there's also this
Mm.
thing called interfering memories, right? Which is where another telepathic force kind of got in the way. It's like radio signals getting mixed up,
Hmm.
and so he was starting to like they were kind of justifying some of the reasons why some of the past mistakes had failed, but
Mm.
also like an intelligent human being who was just very interested in the subject and kind of progressed the movement of it. Um, so yeah, Rene Warcollier.
Hmm.
We'll go
Hmm.
for that. Yeah. What do you think about Rene?
I'm glad he's doing what he's doing. Same a bit like the flat earthers, but I don't know where I sit on this one yet.
Yeah. Well, here's a one thing I like to. Something he actually claimed is that telepathy was a primitive ancient form of communication, and I quite like that idea. That's something I think because cavemen communicated, but they didn't necessarily speak to each other, and maybe they used to. So maybe it's like this thing we've forgotten, and that
Yeah.
some people are still able to do. And I think there could be something there. And whilst up until this point, what I mentioned so far, there's nothing massively convincing here. In fact, a lot of it end up disproving itself. I
Mm.
think the 70s is where it gets quite interesting, but the really recent stuff in 2024, which I'll come to towards the end, is the most convincing and most compelling for me. And that's the one that made me stop and think, is there something here?
I mean, if we go back to that regression conversation, do you still think maybe animals and plants can still, on a different conscious plane, talk to each other?
Dude, I have a beautiful, wonderful dog, but unfortunately, he's a little bit reactive around other dogs. So when I take him out, some dogs he'll go past and be like, "Right, bro, how's it going? Waggly tail. Yeah, we're all good here, my friend."
Mm.
But they don't speak. And then another time, he'll catch a glimpse of a dog that he's not a fan of, and he'll just go, "You what, mate? What are you?" And he's just going nuts. And so he's clearly getting triggered by something this dog is doing. Now, whether that communication is like a look or a smell or
Hmm.
a sense. I don't know. Maybe it's a different sense that we don't understand. But
Maybe
there's
that dog
something.
telepathically
It's like
insulted his mum.
your mama.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
She was a
That could be
bitch.
it. Yeah. So fast forward from 1921, when we're talking about Renee, to 1970. Okay. Um, this is where you get the Stanford Research Institute. And bear in mind, this is not anything to do with the Stanford University. Just a similar name. Um, Basically, there's two major players of this research institute. You've got Russell Targ and Halperoff. Um, there is a bit of Scientology background there. I think one of them or both of them were both Scientologists, and one of them, and I can't remember which, well, he was a Scientologist, is when he got really interested in this stuff.
Hmm.
And there's another guy later who also basically I'll talk about briefly, but his name's Pat Price, and his stuff's a bit crazy. Like he did some things that were not actually really disproven, but then he went on to claim some crazy, crazy stuff, which I guess we'll talk about at the end. But coming back to the Stanford Research Institute, so these guys basically were their job was to try and find and prove telepathy or psychic abilities. And they actually got Uri Geller involved. And Uri Geller went to them and he actually didn't successfully do his famous spoon bending under the extreme conditions they put him under. So the idea was throughout all of this time, whilst there's no real proof, what they have done, they start to hone in on how they test these subjects so that they can't be cheated. And so
Mm-hmm.
by this point, they're like blindfolding them and wrapping them in like cloths, and they've got people on location and people off location if it's like a remote viewing situation, which we'll talk about Pat Price in a second.
Mm-hmm.
So Uri Geller is like already a celebrity. He gets involved. There's another guy that's already like a celebrity, and they actually end up disproving, or at least he has a bad day, right? Like, so they're kind of like taken quite seriously because of that at that point. But the Pat Price character, which we'll talk about more at the end as well, his story was the one that got me really interested because allegedly they
Mm-hmm.
put him under conditions, and bearing in mind they got um, and I think at this point, if I remember correctly, this is actually later came out to be like a top secret investigation, but then I think they released it later. So the Pat Price papers were released in like 2000s, but um, in that we understand that there was a experiment where he was given coordinates of a location, transported himself mentally, remote viewed this location. And he'd done this a few times successfully with them, but in this situation, they'd given him the coordinates to a cabin. And I've had this story a few different ways, so I'm just going to try and stick to the points that I know. They gave him the coordinates of a cabin,
Mm-hmm.
but when he remote viewed, he ended up going to seeing this green filing cabinet, opening the
Mm-hmm.
green filing cabinet, reading through the files, and in there then started speaking out loud very, very top secret missions that were US government related. And the idea was, well, how did you get to that location? You went to the wrong location. And I believe because they have a guy on site at the cabin, because it was like one of their holiday homes. So they're like,
Mm-hmm.
go on then, tell us what's in there. I know what's in it. It's my holiday home, right? And he didn't go there. But what he did, he went up the dirt track down the side of the road. They didn't even know it existed until they investigated the location. And
Mm-hmm.
lo and behold, there's a US secure facility there that does have papers on these really top secret projects. So now you've got so basically this is obviously then starting to get quite controversial because how did he possibly know some of those names if he's like really just tricking? So his story is quite interesting, but he goes on to some crazy stuff later, which I'll talk about. But in the 70s now, this is all in the 70s. I just wanted to say, we talked about how we've got a lot of similarities throughout these episodes so far. Loads of stuff happened in the 70s, like 60s and 70s.
Flared trousers and buckaroo.
I don't know what that means.
Everyone was wearing flared trousers.
Oh, flare
Yeah.
trousers, buckaroo,
Well, it
buckaroo.
was the Cold War, height of the Cold War.
Yeah, I mean, so much happened around then. So you've got basically, obviously, you had the nuclear race, you got the space race, which we spoke about, but this is like the espionage race. Apparently, like this was like a
Mm.
thing. So Russia had like these experiments they were doing. Sorry, America were doing them. We probably had them as well, you know. And so this was a real thing they were actually investigating. And in 1982, the one I mentioned before, the Stanford Research Institute, it became like military owned for like 9 years, I think, until 1991, until it went back to the original guys who, and then I think it was basically like a joint thing. And then it actually only ended in 1995. But when it did, they did actually declassify all of the files on this. So you can go and read about all of this stuff. It's out there, it exists,
Mm-hmm.
and it's been released by the US government. So whether you believe the experiments happened in the way that it is documented is the bit up to discussion. But what I'm saying about these things existing is absolutely true. So loads of quite interesting stuff in there that started to get me sort of okay. I'll dip my toe in now, and I think I'll jump in for a swim.
But does it classify as a conspiracy theory when these things have actually been confirmed?
Of course, because the
Where's the
definition.
conspiracy?
No, conspiracy is just to conspire, right? The idea is that some individuals did something in secret for reasons of their own benefit or for reasons against the greater public's need, right? So
Mm.
the Watergate is a very famous conspiracy that happened, right? We know it
Mm-hmm.
happened, but it's still a conspiracy, and you can still talk about theories as to why it might have happened. But yeah, you're right. Some conspiracy theories are out there and known. This one, I guess, the the conspiracy is whether the ability exists, right? not whether the experiments happened at this point, because as I said,
Mm-hmm.
that's public knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
But I think then where some of those conspiracies go is then you start to get into the realms of like flat Earth and the crazy stuff that I think you and I sort of have been steering away from, but it's been kind of fun. Just before I move on to, I guess, the details of the conspiracies, I know you've been reading about some of these as well, so we can go through these together. But the one thing I did really want to mention was the telepathy tapes, and this is completely separate now.
This is what I was mostly
Mhm.
going down, which is more was really interesting. In
Yeah,
not
so
a not in a military conspiracy kind of way. It was more interesting in a personal interest way. How hard to explain that, but as a
explain
non
what it is
conspiracy theorist,
for anyone that doesn't know what the telepathy tapes are. Explain kind of what it is when you what your overview of it kind of was.
academic psychologists, researchers looking and researching children, primarily non-verbal autistic children, and their ability to use telepathy between them and themselves and their family members.
Mm. Yeah, and it's
That in
all.
a nut. That in a nutshell
Yeah,
is what
yeah.
it's.
There's 9 episodes. It's really great. It's really worth watching. And for me, that was the one where I was like, "Oh my god, I actually am not sure if I might believe there's something here." Because originally when I went into this and I started reading about Pat Price and stuff, I'm like, "This sounds like a movie script. This doesn't feel like it feels like a story that's kind of over time is enveloped and it's not really the same that really what really happened. Obviously the
Mm,
documents are there, but then equally that's up for interpretation too, right? I mean, they said they declassified it because it was unsuccessful, and obviously the conspiracies around that, which we'll get into in a second, is well, maybe it was successful and blah blah. But the telepathy tapes, you've got these kids on camera doing these incredible things, and these guys are going to such extreme measures as well. They're taking all reflective services down. They're blindfolding the kids. They're blindfolding the mom. They're using random picture generators so that no one could know what the image was going to be. Um, yeah, it's really intriguing. Jesse Michaels does a cool episode on this as well. Where he kind of goes, he interviews a lot of the people involved and goes through this and kind of gives a nice overview. And I actually watched that before I started watching the Telepathy tapes, but it was
mm.
yeah, really interesting. That one for me was like the most compelling one. And mm,
Agreed. I found that more. I don't want to say the word believable, but I'm going to say the word. It found more believable than some of the CIA stuff.
yeah,
Agreed, the CIA stuff happened, but I have my own theory on why that happened itself.
yeah. So, I mean, with the conspiracy stuff, I haven't really written anything down, or I didn't really like have anything against the telepathy tapes, if I'm honest. So I don't have a debunking of it. Like, and I had a little look around to see if I could find anyone else, and there was no one that convinced me. So I was like, oh, I'm gonna leave that one open. Like, I don't know what I think there, but
Y-
I
I
kind of believe.
don't. Yeah, I don't think there is a conspiracy there. This it is academic researchers looking into the abilities of these children. What I mean, apart from maybe funding, what else have they got to gain? I mean, it is their job. It is
Mhm,
their livelihood.
absolutely. Hmm.
I would definitely recommend people watch it.
Yeah, 100%. It's on YouTube Premium, I think. Um,
Mm,
and as I said, the Jesse Michaels episode is obviously free on YouTube as well, so you can
mm,
give you a taste and see if you like it. I did find it quite sad, but obviously a lot of these kids are super happy, right? Just because they're
hmm
non-verbal and autistic doesn't mean they're not happy and wonderful, loving children. But um, yeah, I felt kind of sad that they were kind of being scrutinized in a way. But it's so interesting. I want it to happen, but I'm like, it feels almost mm,
Yeah, I don't think. Yeah, I get what you mean by they're being tested, but
mm,
if it's just as easy as it is for you to
like playing a game.
speak, then it's hard, or playing a game, then
Mm.
it's not really being tested.
Yeah, and obviously the main lady is super lovely. Like she's got such a nice manner about her. So
Yeah.
it's not like they're like do this now, like you.
No, it's not animals in the circus. They
No,
were.
no. No, but it just, yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's something personal for me. It just felt like at times uncomfortable to watch. So I understand why people might not like the idea of it, but I think the point behind it is just far surpasses all of that. It's like, oh my god, this is a bit crazy. Talking about crazy,
Hmm?
I've got some conspiracy theories here for you, Mike.
Go ahead.
The most obvious. So, mainly thinking about what I said about in the 70s with the Stanford Research Institute and all of that stuff. Pat Price, all of that. Obvious one is that the CIA hit it because it was successful in being used as a weapon or some form of like warfare.
Mm.
And that's just it seems a bit like with a lot of these, like when it came to JFK, I was like, CIA, that seems like plausible. And now I'm just like, well, it can't all be the CIA, can it? Like, maybe it is. But yeah, it seems like a bit of an easy one, that one.
In what sense? Because I've got my own theory on this one.
Go on then.
When you have a technology or a way of finding out information, I'm going back to the World War II pilots who had radar in their aircraft, British pilots, and to get around it, they used to say that the British pilots used to eat carrots so they could see in the dark. Now, the CIA or otherwise American intelligence had a way of seeing things through other means, but this is their eating carrots to see in the dark. It's a red herring. So it pushes other countries' intelligence agencies into looking into what this could be, whilst you're distracting them from the actual way that they are gathering their intelligence. This is the carrots
It was
to see in the dark.
It was just a big big false flag, kind of like a false flag in the sense that it's like, there's definitely this thing, guys. You should definitely look it up. Like, you should spend loads of money.
A red herring, yeah.
Yeah, red herring, but like an intentional one.
Mm.
Yeah, I like it. Okay, I mean, yeah, that makes sense. So you think the CIA could have been behind it and did drive it, but it doesn't mean it's successful. It could have just been because it was a good thing to like distract them with.
Distract people from the
Don't do
real
the
way.
nukes, guys. Look at all these
Yeah.
guys that can see into the future. That seems
Yeah.
so evil. Okay, that's pretty plausible. Getting a bit more crazy. The theory that via remote viewing, we have found out that extraterrestrial civilizations do exist and can be observed, and actually also communicate in that way. That's how they communicate.
There is a famous school sighting called the aerial school sighting. I don't know if you've seen it before.
Nope. School sighting.
Yeah, I think it happened in Zimbabwe at the aerial school, and there's some really good YouTube videos.
I'm sorry, you're talking about a school in Zimbabwe that witnessed a UFO.
Yes.
Yes, I have seen that, and
when
they
the
even
UFO came down.
pictures.
Yeah, when the UFO came down and it spoke to the children through telepathy.
They did. That's so true. Yeah, absolutely. And what we were just talking about earlier about animals and prehistoric civilizations, that may have communicated before they developed verbal communication. That kind of all ties in there. Maybe we are the aliens, Mike. Maybe we become the aliens.
We are the cavemen, but
yeah, well, to them we are potentially.
no, I think possibly there are individuals who can do it. Obviously, the children with autism that were under that sort of research project, but maybe there's people you don't. It's not a prerequisite to have autism to be able to do it.
Well, I just think like, as we know with like a lot of forms of autism, it often just because there is a deficit in one area, there's sometimes actually a peak in another. So you get these incredible pianists; these guys can like paint perfect pictures from memory, all of that stuff. Whilst they are maybe unable to have a social conversation, they're able to do that, right? And so maybe this is just another one of those extremities that's being honed in on because of their form of autism, that they are able to communicate. But then you start to get into real questions of, if that's the case, then potentially we need to more seriously consider the idea. We need to more seriously consider the idea that consciousness does not exist in the body.
Yep, there's different levels to it.
Because if I'm able to home in on your consciousness or project a thought into your consciousness or understand what you're thinking, then it must exist outside of your head. Because how am I able to? I'm not in your head. So there's we probably will touch on like maybe a consciousness episode or something like that. I don't know, or maybe we'll just keep recurring in all of these. But there is a and there's like a lot of schools of thought about consciousness, and one of them is that we are just an antenna receiving consciousness. And if
Hmm.
that's the case, then like an antenna, those waves are out in the ether and maybe can be picked up on, just like the CIA can listen to all of our phone calls, right? So
Use,
there's
using
something
that
there.
metaphor, then we would
Mm.
just be the radio. We're not the telegraph tower sending out the signals. We'd just be able to pick the signals up.
Yeah, yeah, we're just the antenna receiving the signal. We're the output,
Mm.
but the input it comes from somewhere else and all the way to us. Goes through a tuner, then a distortion, a delay,
Mm.
reverb, and then into that's the idea. So
DI out.
yeah, just just an interesting thought there. I didn't really plan to mention this, but one really thing I'm interested in is the I think it's called the double slit theory. This is like a particle physics, right?
Yes, physics. Yeah.
And the double slit theory is the theory that observation affects what particles do. And I'm trying to speak about this as a layman because I am a layman, but equally I don't want to speak out of turn. But my understanding is they shot the particles through two slits, and when they looked at it, they threw the two slits into a wall, and as you'd expect, you see the outlines of the two slits imprinted on the wall. But when they look away, that's not what happens, and it's just kind of spread out everywhere. And I think it's certain particles. I can't remember which particles. I should definitely have looked this up. As I said, I didn't really plan about talking about this, but that suggests also, if that's true, that also suggests that consciousness is doing something outside of our body.
I will have to look up that experiment because
Maybe we'll bring it up again.
I remember seeing the two slits and they were firing particles through, but instead of creating two slits behind it on the wall, it created four.
Yeah, something like that. It just wasn't what you expected, and the
Nothing you'd
idea was
expect. Yeah.
and the difference was someone was watching and someone wasn't, essentially,
Mm.
between the two experiments.
We'll have to look into that.
Yeah, I mean, maybe we can have a little look whilst we're finishing up. But I think the premise is the same, right? Maybe I've got the details of the experiment wrong, but the idea of it still links to what we're kind of saying about being able to receive these signals from outside of our bodies, and thus that might be why this remote viewing or some sort of psychic ability does actually have a bit of weight and
Mm.
does actually is potentially a thing. Just to really like go on to the real wild stuff for a second, okay?
Okay.
Just to get it out there. So I mentioned Pat Price earlier, and Pat Price became a bit of like a legend in the ESP community, right? He died whilst he was still like working on this, so that's immediately gonna cause suspicion, right? Because
That's a conspiracy theory greatest hits.
yeah, absolutely. But from what I understand about it, the Pat Price files I mentioned about the cabin and it end up being the government thing. But later on, some of the stuff he goes into is crazy. So, like, I think he's also got a Scientology background because he uses a lot of like terms like a thetan. And a thetan is essentially an immortal human soul or a spiritual being considered to be a true identity of a person rather than their physical body or mind. And the idea was he'd managed to remote view a alien base on Mars, and he believes that there was like a god Xenu, I think, or there's lots of like intergalactic gods, and they're basically what the way I understood it is their currency is our souls. So that is like
That
he
harks
went from
back to another episode.
right about when I mentioned the soul catcher on the moon or, or
Oh
whatever it
no,
was.
when we did about why would aliens come to visit us? This is episode one.
Oh
Why would
yeah,
they want to come? They'd be farming us. What for? For our souls.
yeah, yeah,
Our
and
souls.
so our souls. oh
Our
my,
souls.
our souls. Yeah, I don't know. Obviously, like a lot of Scientology stuff in there. We should definitely do one on Scientology, by the way. That would be really fun. Um,
Ah, they'll come to our doors and like.
yeah, let them come. Anyway, really crazy stuff. Uh, the Pat Price files in themselves is like a whole rabbit hole. There's loads of YouTubers that have kind of done some really deep dives into this over multiple episodes. But that is the trees don't exist side of the side.
Yeah, I've not done any research into Pat Price, but why would the government keep their top secret records in a cabin in the woods?
No, they didn't. No.
No.
The coordinates they gave the guy were
Yeah.
for the cabin in the woods.
Ah.
Down the road from that is a dirt track, and following that dirt track is a secret government facility. That's where the cabinet was. So he just didn't. He arrived and he claimed, as I said, this guy was claiming that it's not like pictures, it's like a sense and a feeling. So obviously, this government facility is obviously giving more of a vibe off than this cabin in the woods. So I guess he gets there and he's like, this must be where they want me to go. I don't know, dude. You're not really, you don't really get like a play by play of what you're seeing. You kind of
No.
just get the end bit. So it's hard to interpret the document to
Yeah.
understand what was actually happening
Hmm.
because you've just got this linear text in front of you, right? So that's the claim is that the filing cabinet was in the secret government facility. He also, I think, he moved a needle or something, or like something in one of these facilities, and it basically caused like the CIA to turn up at the institute's door and be like, "What are you up to?"
Right.
And so there was a lot of interesting stuff around there. I personally am not sure I believe in that stuff as much as I did the telepathy tapes. But where I really go with this stuff is I think it I do think there's something there about ancient civilizations, but maybe we're able to home in on some of this stuff. Maybe that's how they built the pyramids. There's a link there with aliens if they exist, being able to do this stuff, maybe teaching us how to do it,
Hmm.
you know. And I do believe there's a lot more around us than we can observe. We're seeing a very thin slice of reality with our five senses,
Hmm.
and there are other senses that other beings and creatures have, and there's a lot more going around than we understand. I mean, even string theory thinks there's like 11 dimensions, right? So I can't see them. They if they're
Hmm.
here, you know. So like there's I do believe there is so much more to reality than we are able to comprehend and understand and probably ever will. And because of that, I'm actually quite open to the idea that something in that ether that I am unable to interpret, someone might be able to, and thus be able to do incredible things that I can't explain.
I would not disagree a word with any of that.
Mm,
I would agree with everything. And I feel like I'm such a person that is so grounded in this reality that I
hmm
wish I had the ability to transcend a bit more than the meat and potatoes, nuts and bolts of everyday life. But unfortunately, I don't.
Well, it was good news, Mike. Part of the 1995 declassified files that were released when they shut down the Stargate project, or it was called. It's basically a step by step on how they were training soldiers for 4 years on how to uh, use this and home in on this. Now they claim it was unsuccessful, but why don't you go give it a go, mate? Maybe there's only a one in a million people that can do it. Maybe one of us is one of those people, and then maybe what we can do is we can, rather than uploading these videos to YouTube, we can just put them in everyone's brains, and then just be internationally known.
Like you two dropping their album onto
Yeah,
everyone's iPod again.
yeah. Just bang for
Yeah.
30 minutes of us chatting bollocks.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, really like this one. This one, I think you're right. That you earlier on we were talking about what is a conspiracy and is this a conspiracy theory? But I do think for me it all comes under the same bracket because it
Yeah.
blends so much into other things. So for me, they're all conspiracies. And actually, what I'd love to be able to do is kind of change everyone's perspective of the word conspiracy theory because conspiracies have happened, and there's probably a ton more that have happened that we don't know about. And so I think we need to be more open-minded when people want to talk about this stuff, and rather than a lot of people that get persecuted because maybe they don't believe in the true story of what happened to JFK.
Mm. I
And
mean,
at the
there
end
is
of
a
the
true
day,
story out
sorry,
there. There is a true story out there. It's just it's not been
yeah,
fully divulged.
and at the end of the day, this is great beer drinking discussion. this is a great way. It doesn't hurt to follow yourself down the rabbit hole and see where things go. See if at the end of the conversation you change your mind. Because I went into this one going, don't believe in sidekicks, don't believe in any of this, and then got to the telepathy tapes and started looking at some of the other crazy stuff, and I was like, actually, you know what? I was wrong. I changed my mind midway through. So maybe other people. Don't get me wrong. I'm not going to start becoming a practiced
Yeah.
sidekick, but
I don't think you're wrong, but why not? Why can't this be a thing?
no. Well, that's the thing. It falls into the realm of I can't, just because I don't understand it and can't do it doesn't mean it's not a thing. Like
It's
I
not
can't see
scientifically
it.
repeatable in order to get the same result, I don't think, though.
I think the telepathy tapes are doing quite good things there. I'd love to see where that goes, because what they need now is like peer review, right? Like if someone else can go and do that with those 10 kids, or find other kids around the world that can also do it and use the same tests and get the same results, and that's going to become something we really need to talk about. And I think the more exciting thing about this, actually, for me, is what is the conversation of what is consciousness. Because if this exists, this gets us a step closer to understand what consciousness is. And we do not know the answer to that question. We don't know where it is. We don't know what it is. We don't know what causes it.
No.
So if we found out that something like this was true, that would get us a step towards maybe understanding what our own consciousness is. And in a way, that's kind of like the meaning of life, right? Because if we can understand what we are and why we are, that kind of is we start to understand our purpose. So that's a pretty serious and profound conversation to have. Maybe not beer drinking material. Maybe a
Not for a
glass of wine.
podcast that's called Tinfoil Banter.
Yeah. Well,
What is life?
Yeah, I ask myself every day.
Yeah.
No, really cool topic, really fun. For me, I think we've done 6 of these now, and this one stood out for me alongside the JFK one. These ones, I was like, yeah. The more I read, the more excited I got, and I was like, yeah, this is why I wanted to do this sort of stuff, to chat about this crap with you. So happy
Yeah.
days, Mike. Any closing thoughts? Oh, don't worry. No, I've gone. Don't worry. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.